Outlaw Lawyer.
Welcome back into the Outlaw Lawyer. I'm Morgan Patrick, consumer advocate, joined on set by the Outlaw Lawyers, Josh Whitaker and Joe Hamer. Our special guest is Cassandra Nicholas. She's an attorney also at Whitaker and Hamer. And Whitaker and Hamer Law Firm has offices in Raleigh, Garner, Clayton, Goldsboro, Fuquay, Varina, and Gastonia. And just a reminder, Josh and Joe are practicing attorneys here in North Carolina. They're the managing partners of the firm. If you've got a legal situation that you are facing, you can always call the firm, 800-659-1186. That's 800-659-1186. Leave your contact information, briefly what the call is about, and an attorney with Whitaker and Hamer will be in touch. And you can always email your questions to the program. We'll use them on a future program show. We'll use them on a future show that is upcoming. Again, that's questions at theoutlawlawyer.com. Well, we're getting into it. Dodd versus Jackson Women's Health Leak, the fallout.
Yeah, so Morgan, you were here, so you may very well remember last week, that's all we talked about. Huge news story, especially if you're an attorney, especially if you're a fan of what's going on in the courts and legal news. So we spent an entire show just talking about that leak, what we could figure out from that leak. We read the opinion, but there's still more fallout from the leak. You know, one of the things we talked about was there was a lot of speculation on who caused the leak, why they caused the leak. And that's unsettled. It looks like the Supreme Court's, so there's some stuff I didn't know. The Supreme Court has their own police department. Mm-hmm. The court has its own little police department. And there seemed to be a lot of controversy over just who would investigate the leak. Does the FBI investigate the leak? You know, what happens? But it seems like it's just going to be the internal Supreme Court.
Yeah, the marshals.
What do we call them? The marshals?
Is that what they're called?
I feel like we missed a golden opportunity to call them something cooler than that.
Yeah.
The Supreme Force. I don't know.
Yeah. There's lots of options out there. But then I saw some. You know, they don't really have subpoena power. You know, they can't make people talk to them, and it was kind of hard to figure out what they were going to figure out with their
just try really hard.
Very limited.
Please talk to me.
Pretty please.
And at the Supreme Court, they're not going to be tricking anyone to talk to them. They're approaching very educated lawyers saying, what do you know?
Not necessarily morons there.
I saw a couple of, again, I went to the place you shouldn't go for ever for news. You know, we sit here and we talk about, I like to tell you guys what I've been reading, who I think's been following the story the best, and I'm doing the exact opposite of what I would normally advise, and I'm just heading to Twitter just to see what random people are screaming into the Twitterverse. But I saw a couple of folks try to do their own detective work and figure out who they thought it would be, but they were just blaming, you know, private persons for the most part, and that didn't seem to go very well. I don't know if you saw any of that.
No, I did not. How do you get to that conclusion of just blaming private persons?
Well, I know a lot of people have been just saying that it was Ginny Thomas, just because she was already in hot water for exceeding her role as the spouse of a Supreme Court justice. Yeah. I don't think it was Ginny Thomas, but I'm not involved in the investigation.
Yeah, we're not going on record with that prediction.
I saw a bunch of folks who either knew or figured out who a lot of the law clerks were for a lot of the Supreme Court justices, and they were trying to, internet detective their way to figuring out who they were friends with and who they associated with.
The amount of free time that some people have, man, just really astonishes me.
There are people out there, yes, with an astonishing level of free time.
A lot of people, like people who make memes and things like that, like that seems like a fun lifestyle that I enjoy, but like how?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's just they don't have a bunch of children and things like that, or they abandon them maybe.
So we're
set to play.
We're a week away. We're a week removed from the leak, a little bit more than a week, and I have no confidence that we'll ever know who.
I think we'll know. I feel like
I think we're only going to know if someone just tells us they
have. But at some point, right? At some point.
Maybe like 28 years from now.
Exactly.
There'll be like a blurb.
When there's like space abortions and things have just, like we're at a whole nother level. Like, this is who set this all in motion one day.
The other thing I noticed, you had this, it seemed to just start over the past couple of years, but there's this group of people that will protest, if a elected official here a Supreme Court justice does something that they don't particularly care for, they'll protest like at their homes, like on their driveways, that kind of thing. So we're seeing a lot of that. I saw the Senate did pass a bill to provide more security protection for Supreme Court justice and their family.
They're going to send the Supreme Force out there to
They
hold it down for them.
Call them the Supremes. Oh, wait, that's taken.
Ah.
I'm surprised that actually took a bill by Congress to better protect the Supreme Court justices.
Yeah, I didn't know what kind of level of protection a Supreme Court justice needed before now, but apparently the House, Senate, everybody who needed to vote on it all agreed that they needed more, and the Congress got that done, you know.
Not following it as closely as you guys are, because I don't have this free time that these protesters have. But is this universal protest both ways? Like, are we seeing protest at conservative and liberal justices, like from each side?
I don't know that. I haven't seen.
Yeah, I don't know if it's been at the homes of both, but there are protesters at the Supreme Court on both sides.
Of course, yeah, I can see that. So,
I moved down from D.C. a couple of years ago now.
Where haven't you been?
I know. And through law school, participated in a few protests in D.C. I won't tell you which ones.
So the unaffiliated protests. We don't care about anything.
But D.C. is... They're very good at handling protests. They get those gates set out really fast.
They're probably the best. Some of the best in the world.
They're directing traffic. They've got so if there's any place to protest, DC is the place to do it.
Sure, I get that.
The other thing I was thinking about is if you're, I think we can kind of assume this leak. We don't know who leaked it. We don't know what their political affiliation was, and we don't know their reasoning. But I think we're safe to assume that someone leaked this on purpose to do something to affect judges' votes. Either, I think there's a theory that this will lock them in because a judge who's already voted doesn't want to change their vote. It seemed like they got persuaded. And there's another line of reasoning that's like, we'll protest at the judges' homes and they'll be intimidated or somehow come to a new decision, right? Depending on what side you believe. But I wonder if this is affecting, a Supreme Court justice, how they voted.
It's a very interesting point you made, because you could see it going either way.
Right.
You could see it like just on principle, I'm not going to change, and you could see.
Because that's what I would do.
Well, I don't.
Whatever my vote was, like.
Even if you changed your mind, even if you actually changed your mind, you just be like, you know what?
Because I double down. That's what I do in like trivia, like in bar trivia. Like if I guess an answer, everybody disagrees with me, and it's probably wrong, like I still just double down.
That's
on
the
it, just
thing,
out of
man.
principle.
Like, this is a serious issue that you shouldn't just do to spite people. But if I've got people protesting at my house, I feel like I'm just, you know what? I hate you people.
Yeah.
Even if I change my mind, this is what I'm doing. So
that's something that's been getting a lot of coverage. And when I went down this Twitter verse hole that I shouldn't be in, I saw a lot of people tweeting about the abortion issue, and this would be people who were I guess pro-abortion.
They call it pro-choice, Josh.
Pro-choice.
yeah, Josh.
Pro-choice.
Josh.
Talking about separation of church and state, like there's a lot of legal issues at play here. But I saw a lot of like editorial cartoons and things like that talked about keeping church and religion separate. That's not. I would argue that's not really what this case is about.
You can. I mean, if you look at this as like a sanctity of life issue, like that's independent of like religious values,
Well, and not necessarily even sanctity of life, but at what point in time does...
That's a scientific question to some people. Like, it doesn't have to be a religious issue. I'm just saying, you can frame it in ways where it's absolutely not a... But then again, there is a big religious component to this for a lot of people. So you can understand why that people would make the mistake of kind of equating those two things.
Well, the legal issue that the Supreme Court is looking at here is abortion a constitutionally protected right? So that's kind of what the Supreme Court has looked at. And so nowhere in this leaked opinion, if you read it, does
all
it talk,
98 pages.
Yeah, all 98 pages. Does it discuss separation of church and state? So from a legal attorney perspective, this is not a separation of church and state issue. Now, I know a lot of people could see it that way, right? Because it was now when a Supreme Court justice gets confirmed, their religious views are a very big, it's something they get asked about, right? So we know
that's and it's understandable why, because certain religious beliefs really frame the way someone would look at this issue.
Right.
And it's only logical to believe that an individual who's just a person who's supposed to be a neutral judge judging based on the law isn't necessarily going to be able to put aside strong religious convictions.
Yeah.
And just look at something independent of that.
Right. But I thought that was a legal technicality that maybe someone who wasn't a practicing attorney maybe would not pick up on. So even though religion's probably important to the debate for those reasons, it's not legally, this isn't a First Amendment case, this isn't an Establishment Clause case, this isn't a separation of church and state case. So I thought that was interesting because a lot of people were going that way with it. Mm-hmm. A lot of people in the national media, a lot of individuals are going that way, but that's not what we're dealing with from an attorney perspective.
Did you tell those people on Twitter that?
No, I didn't. I just judged them silently.
Yeah, that's what
he was just looking down the rabbit hole. He didn't actually go down.
He didn't want to go
I
in
haven't checked your Twitter. Do you tweet much?
I don't. I retweet stand-up comedians and old pro wrestlers a lot.
Yeah.
That's really all I do on there.
That's probably what the algorithm would bring to me.
I was going to ask this question because we talked about it in our last program. Do you think there's any significance to the draft being dated late February and then it gets leaked in early May? It's almost like, did the draft change and the people that didn't like the change leaked the draft?
Oh, yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
Or did the draft not change and the people that didn't like the fact that the draft wasn't changing, they somehow
Yeah, you got to think they had access to it.
I mean, it's sitting there for a good month.
Sure.
Marinating, and all of a sudden it gets leaked. I just think that's interesting.
I think we proposed at the time when we were talking about this last week that there's probably some concurring opinions floating around and some, like we talked, I think we
dissenting.
used some scathing. I think is the word we used.
Yeah.
So you think there's been healthy, robust discussion over these couple of months?
Sure.
And yeah, who knows? Again, I don't know that we can really, like we talked about earlier, I don't know that we can point to a side because who knows why the leaker leaked.
Yeah.
Why did the leaker leak?
Say that 10 times.
Yeah. But and then today again we're in the studio on a Wednesday, so by the time you hear this, it'll have already come to pass one way or the other. But we were just reading that the Senate intends to put for a vote a bill that would guarantee access to abortions. But we were just reading that just now.
That's supposed to happen today. However, the filibuster still exists. They haven't gotten rid of that. So in order for this bill to pass the Senate, they would need 60 votes. The Democrats would need 60 votes, and they absolutely do not have 60 votes. So this is expected to fail today. But it's really for the purpose of them being able to debate it on the floor, put out their views and their criticisms of Republican views, essentially. So it gives them a platform, even though it's not expected to have an effect.
I think
it's a good segue to talking about our next segment with Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, because it's a similar thing where it's probably not going to accomplish anything, but it gives them a good platform to put a lot of argument out there.
Well, I think it's a good play. I think we're heading into midterms, and no matter what side of the debate you're on, I like the fact they're putting people to task and saying, well, what side are you on? Because that's kind of what that was. In the leak, Justice Alito was basically saying this shouldn't be a Supreme Court issue. Your elected officials, whether on the state level or on the federal level, this is something that needs to be legislated. Mm-hmm. And Congress doesn't seem to get a whole lot done, right? They're usually deadlocked, and so I think this is a good thing for whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. The people voting for you need to know what side you stand on. Putting it to a vote and seeing who votes no, I think that's going to be real tough for a lot of these folks who don't want to take a stand right before midterms. But I've already seen the election commercials change, right? This is the number one thing.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, all the election commercials have changed, and they're talking about abortion and constitutional rights and what they'll protect or what they'll stop. But everything has changed. This is defining the whole midterm election now, for better or worse.
Seems like a pretty big deal, man, this thing.
Yeah, it is. It's something everybody seems to have a very strong opinion on. and where compromise is difficult, right? Anytime you have a situation where you have competing equities that don't have a good avenue for negotiation, for compromise, you get these polarizing moments like this, and who knows, right? I mean, who knows where we end up.
The Outlaw Lawyers, Josh Whitaker and Joe Hamer. You can find them at Whitaker and Hamer Law Firm. They're the managing partners there, practicing attorneys here in the great state of North Carolina. Our special guest on set today is Cassandra Nicholas, also an attorney at Whitaker and Hamer. If you've got a legal situation that you're facing and you need some answers, I've got a phone number for you, 800-659-1186. That's 800-659-1186. Leave your contact information, briefly what the call's about, and an attorney with Whitaker and Hamer will be in touch. And you can email your questions to the program, questions@theoutlawlawyer.com. We'll answer those on future programs. Coming up next, Depp versus Heard defamation.